But as my pastor says, you never let your right now get in the way of your not yet,
How about that?
because it's you can work to achieve your dreams. That's the way this world works. One person asked me one time, and he came up to me and he was sincere. He said, "Man, I know it makes you feel good to be a rich man's son." I
Hmm.
said, "I don't know about that, but it sure makes me feel rich being a good man's son."
First, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about your father, Fred Luster. I wonder if you could start by giving us a little background on the company, because for people that don't know the industry, don't know what's going on, I really
hmm
want to give them the context. Mhm.
Um, Luster Products. Luster Products was founded by Fred Luster Sr. in 1957.
Mm.
Um, prior to starting the company, he was a barber, and as a barber, he had skills, and with skills, you develop a clientele. And during that time frame when he started barbering, the process style, which is men's hair straightening, chemical hair straightening, became very popular, driven by a lot of the entertainers of that time frame.
Right.
And a matter of fact, I didn't know till recently that when Sammy Davis Jr. came to town, Dad did his hair. He
Oh,
did Stephen Fetchit for years. Lou Rawls would come through the shop, and he'd do Lou
all
Rawls,
right.
and there was a number of high profile guys that would come through, and a lot of the blues artists as well. They
All
got their
right.
hair done in the shop. So, he developed a reputation. And as he went along, the products that he needed were two things: one, short supply, and two, questionable quality in many instances. So
Mhm.
he said, "You know what? Let me try to throw my hat in the ring." And he was fortunate enough to meet some chemical supply salespeople who put him on to formulations and helped him, to guide him, because he didn't know, anything about formulating a product at that point. But he was a quick study. He was just one of those people that you let him in the ring, and that's probably the worst thing you could do, because he's going to take the ring for himself. And so he had a knack for it. He developed products that worked. But as a popular barber stylist, a lot of times people, your peers will give you credit, but the credit was not based on your skills. The credit was based on what you use. And how fortuitous can a person be? They wanted to emulate him, not only his technique, but what he used. So he began to go around and teach, these techniques to people, and they would buy the product. And that's virtually how the company was born. The company started, with a few dollars that he borrowed, and a tub, some chemicals, and a stick to blend the chemicals in his basement.
Wow.
Literally,
Wow.
literally, you know. And so he progressed, and he began to, he acquired a rental space that was two doors west of the barbershop, and he was able to afford a small kettle. And then that was when formal production began with the four or five products that he started with. But from there, you're talking about Horatio Alger's story. The business began to grow. It was stalled for a good little while. It's like BB King said. BB King said it took him 20 years to become an overnight success. And it was similar. He struggled. He struggled, man. It was many instances that he sold the products, but his income came from the barbershop. But he had a vision,
Okay.
he had a dream, and he had passion. And so he hung on, and it developed into something that was very notable. His most notable attributes to me was his values in general, which included fairness and wanting to treat people the right way. He just was humane in that way.
Right.
Never took advantage of any situation, never let anybody cheat themselves, demanded fair treatment for himself. But he just those kind of values are what allow us to exist as Luster Products to this day. And those were the things that caused him to be successful, in my estimation, along with his skills.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think that being an entrepreneur was ever an option for you, or being actually, I don't know about so much being an entrepreneur, because you actually grew up in the business
Yes.
and uh, became a part of it because I mean, you not, and I'm most of your siblings because you have how many siblings?
I've got two siblings.
Okay,
One's in the business now. The other's retired out of the business.
okay,
So
so all of you worked in the business at one time or
absolutely,
another.
yep.
Do you think that there were options for you at that point, at
Always.
early points
Yeah,
in your life?
there were always options. When I came here, from a salary standpoint, I'm glad I didn't bite, but I had greater opportunities outside the company that I did within. But it was
Mhm.
my sense of family that led me to want to come in and help
Right.
and try to add value. And I was fortunate that I did add value, and that man, you don't know how gratifying that was. And as you go down the road, you're adding value. When you begin to get rewarded for that value you add, oh, you don't know how gratifying that is. And I say that in this sense. We weren't doing well when I joined. That was before, we began to really excel. And I had friends that I went to school with and graduated. Many of them tried to talk me out of, well, what are you doing there, man?
Right.
You should be with us. We live up north on the Gold Coast.
Ah,
What are you doing? Well, what do and they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see the opportunity. Like a lot of people, they can only see the here and now. They're not blessed with forward thinking and vision of how things can be. But as my pastor says, never let your right now get in the way of your not yet.
how about that?
Because you can work to achieve your dreams. That's the way this world works. So, but yeah, Dad was he started from very humble beginnings, and he had a great business acumen. Even though he didn't have a lot of formal education, he had a great business acumen, much greater than I ever had. And so he knew how to create demand, satisfy his customers. He was one of those people that was hell bent on providing a quality product, even without a crack R&D team at that point in his life. He was the R&D team as well as the compounding team, you know. But quality, he couldn't let it go if it wasn't right. It's got to be right. Those were his words. It's got to be right.
Right.
And so all of those kinds of things, his values and his quest for quality, those were the cornerstones of the business and what allowed the business to eventually grow and become what it became.
So, Jory, do you think that at the time when he was getting started in the business, you talked about a small, loan. I mean,
Mhm.
today we have, banks that are more receptive to people to lending in the community. We have government programs that provide guarantees or other
Sure.
uh, options, and some people are fortunate enough to have had experience in the financial industry so that they can find ways to get private investment capital
Mhm.
for their businesses. That's a very, very, even now, that's a very, very small number of people. But I just
Sure.
wonder what kinds of resources did he have available to him when he got started with that business and how that kind of compares to what's going on now?
It's no comparison to what's going on now. Back then, everybody was skeptical to loan an African American entrepreneur anything. It just didn't happen. And you're
Right.
talking about before Carl Perrin really started the SBA and got all that stuff going. There was nothing out there back then. And your only means of generating capital were sales and your accounts receivable. Your cash flow, that was your capital. And so you had to try to increase the velocity of that and find creative ways to do that. But there were no means, in particular, for a person that had limited education and limited formal business experience. Even now, today it's not easy. It's really not easy.
Right.
It'll make it sound easy, and there's some people that really have proven themselves to be worthy, but that's based on their success in life in the marketplace, and they have a bushel basket full of money as you sit. Those are
Right.
easy to take a chance with, and they have the connections. Back then, it didn't. That just didn't translate.
What is your sense uh, of how that kind of energy, that kind of optimism uh, exists today? I mean, do you see it? What would your father think about what's going on today? I'd love to get a sense of what, you know, he thought
Well, let
about
me
what's going on today.
let me tell you what I see first, and then I think his interpretation would be very similar to mine.
Okay.
Well, when we talk about those early days when he began to really become a full-fledged entrepreneur and not
Mhm.
not just a business that was a side business. You also had, a Johnson Products to look at. You
Mhm.
also had an Ebony and Jet magazine, Johnson Publishing, to look at.
Right.
But also, even more importantly, that was the era of Independence Bank,
That's right.
Seaway Bank, right?
Right.
And forget the name of the bank in New York, where Jackie Robinson was involved.
Right.
You had banks. They began to spring up, and this was in the middle to late '60s. All this began to happen, and there was an uptick in black entrepreneurialism at that point in time.
Mhm.
Now that kind of coincided with the civil rights movement, right? And the
Mhm.
successes that were had out of the civil rights movement, right? And
Sure.
so up till through from the middle '70s to
Mhm.
recently, it was really looking dire for any form of black entrepreneurialism. But now these young people are finding ways. I don't They're raising money by GoFundMe. They've
Mhm.
learned how to communicate to their target via social media, which doesn't cost a lot of money, right? You
Mhm.
have to be savvy with it, right?
Right.
And how you communicate and how you deliver the message. And we've got a society of people that have become conscious. And this is something that you and me, Dwayne, we didn't know in the '70s and '80s, but
Mhm.
they become conscious. And I want to know who I'm buying from. And I want to
Mhm.
agree with how I line up with them. I want to agree with their values. I want to know where they're coming from. When we
Right.
came into the business, we had a lot of non-black companies that were posing as black companies with
Right.
black images, and they actually out-blacked us in many cases.
Right. Right.
Well, young people today, they're saying, you know what? I'll buy ice cream from this company. I know these people and do a great job. I'll buy food from these people. I like them, right? And I'm gonna
Mhm.
spread the word when I do. I'll buy skincare from this lady. I like her. And so this
Right.
is going on all over the country, man. Maybe even in other countries as well. This is something new. I came up in an era and taught by my dad. You walk softly and you carry a big stick. These guys are saying, you know what, I'm going to tell the world who I am. I'm going to be boisterous about it and the
Right.
value that I'm adding, right? And what I can do for them and what I'm trying to do for the world. And I'm going to get consumers to line up with it. And
Right.
so it's a different era, man. It's some stuff that's going on that's almost magical. It
You know,
really
I
is.
had the pleasure of getting to meet your father as a result of, and really to get to know you better as a result of the American Health and Beauty Aids Institute.
Absolutely.
Um, I always got the impression that your dad was the coolest of the bunch because
Mm.
he was just very laid back, very soft spoken, never seemed to get his feathers ruffled by any stuff that
Hmm.
was going on. And but I always got a sense that he was just, what you see was what you got.
Yep.
He was honest. His work and success spoke for him, so he didn't
Yes.
feel like he had to say very much until it was time for him to say something. And then when he said something, he
Absolutely.
said something. But I wonder if that recollection of your father is really consistent with the man that he was to
It
you, to
is.
your family.
It is. He was what you see is what you get.
Hmm.
He didn't talk unless he had something to say of value.
Right.
But the one thing that you didn't capture, and it's hard to see, from the outside looking in, was the dogged determination.
Right. Right.
He would not let anyone deter him from doing anything he thought had value. You couldn't persuade him, you couldn't stop him, you couldn't anything. But he wouldn't even pursue things that didn't have value. He just wouldn't pursue them. He didn't do frivolous things. He was not a frivolous person.
Right.
He went after stuff heart and soul, heart and soul, and could get it done. That's the amazing thing. He would
Right.
work around a lot of people with all these fancy degrees and titles and all that, but he always came out smelling like a rose because he knew how to get it done. He knew how to get the best out of people. But he
Hmm.
was loyal to people, and therefore people were loyal to him.
Right. right.
He was focused, and people knew that were around him. Let me tell you, man, he carried such a, I don't know, it's a combination of charisma, determination, and all this
Mm,
shit. You didn't want to come to him with less than stellar news.
right. Didn't want to disappoint him.
No, and so to have great news, you got to go make something great happen.
Make something happen. That's right.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
right.
but that's the kind of person that he was. You sum that up in presence. He had a tremendous presence. It
He
went
did.
beyond anything that you could imagine. He had a tremendous presence. And then, it didn't hurt that he did come from a long way. He came from humble beginnings and he knew what it was like to be, you know, of that cloth. He
And I
carried
got
that
the
with him
impression he
everywhere.
never forgot it. He
He
never
never
forgot it.
forgot it and he was always appreciative of any and everything,
Right.
you know. He celebrated the people around him. He didn't celebrate himself. He celebrated the
Right.
people around him. His most proud moment was walking through the parking lot to see how many people work for the company,
How about that?
or to be sitting at his desk, Dwayne, and see a loan application come across his desk where somebody was trying to buy a home, and he would say, "Man, because they work here, they can buy a house." He'd
Yeah.
go bragging about it, or buy a
Yeah.
car, or taking out a loan for a kid in school. And he was so happy to be able to sign off on those things. And then the benevolence was unreal. He would
Tell me,
help
talk
people.
a little bit about some of his benevolence and the kinds of, because I know he very quietly supported a lot of people, a lot of things, but again, consistent with his personality, he was very low key about
Well, see, the thing is, you could see the obvious stuff, the contributions and organizations that he supported because he liked them and that sort of thing. But what you didn't see was the guy he knew that found out maybe his wife was ill and the guy didn't have money for medical bills and medical treatment, and he funded that. Or
it. Yeah.
someone who was trying to send a kid to school and didn't want to disappoint him, and he funded that. Those kinds of things, what you don't see.
Right.
Right,
Right.
because he didn't do it for notoriety, he didn't do it for public consumption. He did it because there was somebody that he knew that needed help, and he wanted to help, and he could help,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And so that's the real, crux of it all because he was just a genuine person, and his
Right.
reward was the feeling that he got from being able to help, not bragging about it. Because I most of the times, I didn't know about those things until somebody would come to me after the fact, way after the fact. I get people
Right.
coming to me now. Yo, daddy, let me tell you what he did for me.
Hmm.
He allowed me, man. I was getting put out of my house, and he came up and put up money and talked to the bank and got me a better rate. And yeah, I mean, just stuff that he didn't have to do that he did as a humanitarian
Right.
because he could, and he saw somebody in need that he knew. You know, those that's true benevolence.
Well, for a later time, I really want you to know about what we're doing because I think the Dream Exchange is going to give us an opportunity to not only help businesses like yours or businesses that are seeking private capital and trying to grow. We're going to be able to provide access to that capital in an unprecedented way. And but I think it's so important that as we build the pipeline of businesses that work, that we have the participants to understand that there is more to this than about getting money and making money.
Absolutely.
We stand on the shoulders of people who were successful because of their commitment to the community they serve. And our team wants to create an environment where we can help each other and understand that we have a duty and an obligation and should have the desire to
Yeah,
help each other because true success, as I see it, really only comes when we're helping people around us. And I mean,
absolutely.
you guys have clearly set
Yeah,
an
yeah.
example for how that happens. To be able to feel good about someone else's success, to feel
Mhm.
good that there are cars in the parking lot, that your folks can
Mhm.
afford to buy cars, that they can
Sure.
afford to buy homes, that they can
Yeah.
send their kids to school. That's what everybody wants. That's all that
Yes.
everybody wants. But
Yes.
it doesn't happen just out of nowhere. And I
Yes.
think if we're the day when we could just sit around and wait for good jobs to come from other people, I think those
Mhm.
days are gone. So
Let,
if we're
let, let
going
me
to create jobs in our community that are going to be good jobs, we're going to have to create them for ourselves.
absolutely. Let me say one more thing about Fred Senior. Along those lines. Um, One of the things that he thought was most valuable about his company, once we did get some scale, is the visibility to members of the community, because he thought that the visibility of the company would be aspirational for young people. And they'd say, "Man, look at what Mr. Fred did. I can do that."
Hmm.
He talked about that all the time.
Right.
It was paramount. He
Right.
wanted that visibility so that he would inspire our youth, or inspire anybody that had an entrepreneurial inkling in their
That's right.
blood.
You
Because once
can't
you
be
see
what you
it
can't
done,
see.
you
You
got to
know.
be, and you can go as far as you can see.
That's right.
So, it's about controlling and influencing the sight lines. But that was one of his biggest deals. Whenever he did get a chance to talk, he talked about that. He didn't so much talk about Luster Products and what we've done. He talked about the responsibility that we had because we did have some fortune. And
Hmm.
so that was his thing. And he wanted to inspire young people. That was his thing. Most important.
And that's what this series is trying to do. One of the things we're trying to do is really get people access so they can get to know the folks and
Right.
get a sense of the possibilities,
Yeah.
because it is possible if you believe it and you
Yeah.
try to build your network. And with the internet, is no excuse. I mean, I just don't see any excuses these
Right.
days for not being able to get in there and roll up your sleeves and just stick with it.
One person asked me one time, and he came up to me and he was sincere. He said, "Man, I know it makes you feel good to be a rich man's son." I
Hmm.
said, "I don't know about that, but it sure makes me feel rich being a good man's son."
How about that? All right.
Yeah.
All right. I like that. I'm
Yeah.
going to use
Yeah.
that. I
Yep.
like that a lot. Yes,
Mhm.
sir. That's a good one. That's a great one. That's a great one. That's a great one. And that's what
Oh,
you are. And that's what you've done.
man.
That's what you've
Appreciate you,
done.
man.
So I applaud you